You ever see that guy in the gym who does but one thing? He benches Monday, he benches Wednesday, he benches Thursday, he benches Friday, and benches in his sleep. Then he tells you his bench hasn't moved in 2 years. And then he's surprised that his chest still looks like man boobs. Welcome back to the Power Building 365 podcast. I'm Chris Marzarella. And last week we closed out the Ozempic conversation. This week is different. This week, we're going back to something foundational, a training principle that was first proposed in 1958, and almost nobody who lifts serious weights is using correctly. That principle is SAID, or specific adaptation to imposed demands. It came out of a hypothesis put forward by a guy named Franklin Henry. He was a professor of physical education at UC Berkeley at the time. What he proposed was that the body adapts very specifically to the exact demands you place on it. See, the body responds to the exact load, the exact contraction, the exact range of motion, the exact philosophy, and the exact energy system. Whatever you train, that's what gets better. Now, this might sound like common sense, but it wasn't always. Before 1958, the dominant theory was that physical training built up some kind of general capacity. That if you got better at one thing, you'd get better at everything related to it. Well, Henry's work flipped that. He showed that adaptation is narrow. The body specializes rather than generalizes. And whatever you don't train, whatever demand you don't impose, that ability stays where it is. Or worse, it'll go backwards. So that's the principle. That's the foundation. Now, let me tell you where it breaks down in real life. Because most lifters know the principle exists, but what they don't see is what it does to their training when they take specialization too far. The body becomes very good at the demand you train, and very bad at everything else. Both things happen at the same time. That's the part that nobody tells you. I want to start with a real example. I've got a client. He's with me 7 years now. He's an Ironman relay swimmer, and he's a serious one. He comes to me specifically for the strength and stability that the pool can't provide. We do real posterior chain work, hip extension under load, plyometric reactivity off the ground, core work that holds position outside of buoyancy, and shoulder integrity in patterns that water never asks for. Every block we run is designed to support the swimming. Now, you might be wondering if this is actually doing anything. Let me tell you what the research says. A 2017 study published by Amaro and colleagues in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research looked at age group swimmers, where one group did 6 weeks of dryland strength and conditioning, followed by 4 weeks of swim training, while the control group only swam. The dryland group showed measurable gains in vertical jump and explosive power that the swim only group did not. And then a 2021 paper by Lopez and colleagues in the Journal of Exercise Science and Fitness took it a step further. National level sprint swimmers who added 8 weeks of dryland strength training in just one session a week, alongside their normal in-water training, showed significant improvement in 50-meter and 100-meter front crawl sprint performance, stroke frequency, and bench press strength compared to the control group. One session a week. That's all it took to move the needle for athletes who were already swimming at a national level. A 2021 systematic review by Hermo, I'm probably going to just butcher this name, but I don't care. Hermola Silla and colleagues in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health looked at dryland program and swimming turn performance specifically. Strength, ballistic, and plyometric training focused on neural enhancement was effective for improving swimming turn performance. The pattern keeps showing up. When swimmers add the work to the water in which it can't provide, they get faster, they get more powerful, they hold up better through long competitive seasons. That's not a coincidence. That's a set principle handled correctly. The water trains everything the water can train, but water has limits. It lacks heavy posterior loading, ground reaction force, and the eccentric drive of a barbell. If you only swim, you leave most of your body untrained. So, if all you do is swim, you leave most of the body untrained. That's the trap. Now, I want to bring this idea home because most of you aren't swimmers. Most of you are lifters. And I'm telling you right now, the exact same trap shows up in the weight room. It just wears a different uniform. Let's start with powerlifters. A powerlifter trains to squat, bench, and deadlift. Same thing almost every week. And some accessory work is scattered around the main lifts. Cycles intensity, peaks for a meet, deloads, rinses, and repeats. That works for a while. But at some point, the lifter notices the totals stop moving. Effort and programming remain solid, but there is simply no new tissue to drive further adaptation. I wanted to say that slowly because really it comes down to one thing. It's mechanics. The research on this goes back decades. A 1983 study by Maughan and colleagues in the Journal of Physiology established what's now considered foundational. A direct relationship between muscle cross-sectional area and the force the muscle can produce. Bigger muscle, more force potential. That doesn't mean every bigger guy is automatically stronger. Neural drive matters. Technique matters. Leverages matter. But you can't outrun the ceiling that your tissue size puts on your absolute force production. If your muscle ain't growing, your strength has a built-in expiration date. That's why a powerlifter needs hypertrophy blocks. This is a strategic necessity. Let me try that again. This is a strategic necessity. The tool that creates the raw material for your next strength block. As the thing that creates the raw materials for the next strength block, a meta-analysis by Schoenfeld and colleagues in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research dug into this question of how loading affects hypertrophy. Both heavy loads and lighter loads can drive muscle growth when sets are taken to muscular failure, but heavier loads showed a clear advantage for strength gains. Makes sense, right? The takeaway for a powerlifter is simple. If you only train heavy and low reps your whole career, you're underexposing your muscles to the volume they need to keep growing. Heavy singles use the tissue you already have. Hypertrophy work builds new tissue. You need both, my friends. So if you only train heavy, you're using a bank account you stop depositing into, and that works for a while until the balance runs out. Then the lifter wonders why his bench stalled, why his squat stopped responding, why his deadlift feels like shit and it weighs more than the bar does. Forget magic or effort. The issue is a lack of tissue. Hey, make that rhyme. It's tissue, or the lack of it. Now, let's flip the whole thing. A physique athlete, a bodybuilder, trains for size. High volume, moderate loads, lots of isolation work, constant tension, controlled tempo, full ranges. All the things that grow tissue. That works too. But a bodybuilder who never touches real strength work eventually loses something they didn't notice they were leaning on: neural drive, force production capacity, the ability to recruit a muscle hard under heavy load. The body is responsive to what you ask of it. If you never ask it to produce maximum force, it stops being good at producing maximum force. Pretty simple, right? The pump stays, the volume stays, the size stays for a while. But the engine that drives the muscle starts to dull. That dulling is the said principle in reverse. You stop imposing the demand, so the adaptation faded. That's why a bodybuilder needs strength blocks. To keep the engine sharp under the body that's getting bigger. To keep recruiting motor units that high rep work doesn't touch the same way. To keep the connective tissue strong enough to handle the volume coming back at it later. A bodybuilder who only does 8 to 12 rep sets year round leaves a real piece of his potential on the table. That's not marketing. That's how the system works. So now you got two specialists, one on each side of the lifting world. A power lifter who only trains heavy, a bodybuilder who only trains for size. Both doing what the sport asks of them, both eventually hitting the same wall. That wall is the said principle. Adaptation works in the direction you train it. It doesn't work in the directions you don't. That's half the principle nobody talks about. All right, we're going to take a quick break before we go further. So, I got 2 shows in the OCB on the calendar that I'm involved with as the promoter. The OCB South Carolina Classic is set for June 6, 2026. And if you've been training for the stage and you want a real natural federation, this is the one to look at. After that, my other show is the OCB Natural Kingdom Show, which is on July 25th, 2026. Both shows are run the same way and the right way. Real judging, real tested athletes, real respect for what these competitors put themselves through. If you're competing, get registered early. If you're a fan, come watch. These are the kinds of shows that remind you why natural bodybuilding is supposed to be looking like. All right, back to the training. So the question becomes, how do you actually handle this? If specialists need offset work, how do you organize it? This is where most lifters fall apart. Not because they don't believe in the idea, because nobody ever showed them how to schedule it. Most lifters end up running disconnected programs. 12 weeks of strength, then a month of freelancing. Then they download a hypertrophy program off the internet and they get bored. Then they go back to strength because that's what they actually like. That's program hopping, and I hate it. This approach lacks continuity and a logical through line between training phases. That's not a training plan, my friends. That's a series of moods. Stop hunting for more days or a perfect PDF. The solution is thinking in cycles rather than isolated programs. The fix is to think in cycles instead of programs. A program ends, a cycle hands off to the next cycle. That's the difference. When you think in cycles, the question stops being which program should I run next? The question becomes, what does my body need next based on what it just did. Avoid jumping from fat loss straight into a peaking block. The recovery is lacking at that stage. The nervous system is depleted. The body just spent weeks in a deficit. You transition through a rebuilding phase first. Similarly, avoid rolling from one strength block directly into another. The connective tissue needs a deload. The nervous system needs a deload. The muscle could probably use a hypertrophy phase before the next strength push. Each block earns the block. The next block. That's how real progress stacks across years instead of resetting every 12 weeks. And there's research on this kind of structure too. A 2021 study by Moken and colleagues in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health looked at 11 weeks of block periodized resistance training in college-aged males with different starting strength levels. The findings were clean. They were good. Across all groups, lean body mass and muscle cross-sectional area increased significantly from baseline to post-intervention, regardless of starting strength level. The block periodization structure worked for everyone. Random programming gives you random results. Piss poor planning produces piss poor results. Structured programming gives you stacked results. Let me give you a quick window into what this actually looks like in practice. This is the kind of sequencing I've been organizing for my clients inside Power Building 365. The lifter rolls into a 16 hypertrophy block. Volume is high, frequency is dialed in, the tissue grows. After that block, instead of jumping right into another size or chasing a 1-rep max, they transition through a short rebuild and then into 8 to 10 week strength block. Same major lifts, different rep ranges, different intensity, different tempo. The hypertrophy phase built the bank account. The strength phase makes the withdrawals. Then, after the strength block, we deload, we reassess, and the next cycle gets built around where that lifter actually wants to go. It could be fat loss, it could be a mass gain, it can be recomp, it can be prep. That's not random, my friends. That's a calendar. That's what training looks like when somebody's actually paying attention to it. That's also the reason why this system exists. Because most lifters don't have anybody helping them connect the cycles. The first round of standalone templates pulled from this framework will be ready on June 1st. These are individual blocks, not the full system or a coaching replacement. Power Building 365 is the total system. These are individual blocks, built the same way I build them for my clients. If they're useful to you, they'll be there. If they're not, that's fine too. Let me bring this back around before we close out. The SAID principle is real. It's been studied since 1958. The body adapts to what you train. The body loses ground on what you don't. That means specialization is necessary, but it's not enough on its own. A swimmer needs dryland, a powerlifter needs hypertrophy, a bodybuilder needs strength. Every specialist needs the work that lives outside their main lane. Your sport isn't wrong. It's simply incomplete on its own. A single input has never produced a complete athlete. You never have, you never will. Progress comes through smart sequencing, not by simply adding days or chasing clever programs. It's by training in cycles that respect the principle. A block to specialize, a block to support, a block to recover, a block to build what the next block is going to need. The work isn't more. The work is sequenced. That's the whole job. If you take one thing away from this episode, take this. The thing you do most is the thing that makes you good. The thing you do alongside it is the thing that lets you keep being good. Both matter. Neither one wins on its own. That's the set principle, used correctly. That's the episode. Find me on Instagram at PowerBuilding365. That's where the show updates land first. If this one helped you, please leave a review. It actually helps move the show forward. I'll see you next week. Train smart. Train every day of the year in one way or another. This is Chris Marzarella. You just listened to the Power Building 365 podcast. Have a good week. Dad, I love you. I'm thinking about you.